I've spent years grappling with the question of biblical reliability, and it's not as straightforward as many would have you believe. The historical accuracy of the Bible is a matter of profound importance, not just for believers, but for anyone seeking to understand Western civilization. Today, we're going to explore three main areas that support the Bible's reliability: manuscript evidence, archaeological findings, and fulfilled prophecies. This isn't just about faith. It's about facts, history, and the very foundation of our cultural narrative. Well, when we talk about manuscript evidence, it's not just about having old pieces of paper, you know? It's about the sheer volume and consistency of these ancient texts. When we compare the number of biblical manuscripts to other ancient texts, it's not even close. We're talking about thousands of manuscripts for the Bible, compared to maybe a handful for other historical documents from the same era. And that's not all, not by a long shot. The consistency of these manuscripts over time is frankly astonishing. We're not seeing wild variations or completely different stories. No, what we're seeing is a remarkable preservation of content across centuries. This isn't just coincidence. It's a powerful indicator of the meticulous care with which these texts were copied and preserved. Now, let's talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. The discovery of these ancient texts in the mid-20th century was nothing short of revolutionary. Why? Because they provided us with manuscripts of the Old Testament, dating back to before the time of Christ. This isn't just old, this is ancient. And what did we find when we compared these ancient scrolls to our more recent manuscripts? Consistency. Remarkable consistency. This consistency, you see, it validates the reliability of the Old Testament text we have today. It shows that the text hasn't been corrupted or significantly altered over time. It's a powerful piece of evidence that supports the Bible's reliability, and we can't simply ignore it. Now, let's dig into archaeology, literally. You know, it's easy to dismiss ancient texts as myths or legends, but what happens when we start digging in the dirt? Well, what we find often corroborates the biblical narrative. Archaeology doesn't prove everything in the Bible, but it certainly lends credibility to many of its historical claims. Think about it. Every time an archaeologist's spade uncovers evidence that aligns with biblical accounts, it adds another piece to the puzzle of historical reliability. It's not about blind faith. It's about tangible, physical evidence that supports the biblical narrative. Let's take Jericho as an example. For years, skeptics dismissed the biblical account of Jericho's walls falling down as mere myth. But then archaeologists started digging. And what did they find? Evidence of a city with fallen walls, dating to the time period described in the Bible. And then there's the Hittites. For years, critics pointed to the Bible's mention of the Hittites as evidence of its unreliability, because no one had found any evidence of this civilization. But then, lo and behold, archaeologists discovered an entire Hittite empire. It's a powerful reminder that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Now, let's talk about prophecies. The Bible contains numerous prophecies, many of which, the text claims, have been fulfilled. Take the prophecies about the Messiah, for instance. We're not talking about vague generalities here. We're talking about specific details. Where he would be born, his lineage, the manner of his death. The fulfillment of these prophecies in the person of Jesus Christ is either an incredible series of coincidences or something more. And when you start looking at the statistical probabilities, well, coincidence becomes a pretty tough sell. Let's dig deeper into these messianic prophecies. We're talking about predictions made hundreds of years before the birth of Christ, yet describing his life with uncanny accuracy. Born in Bethlehem, of the line of David, betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. These aren't vague horoscope-like predictions. They're specific, verifiable claims. Now you might say, well, couldn't the gospel writers have just made up stories to fit these prophecies? That's a fair question. But remember, these writers were claiming these events happened in recent history, to a public that could easily verify or refute their claims. Now let's look beyond the Bible itself. You see, we have external sources that corroborate many of the events described in the Bible. Jewish historians like Josephus, Roman historians like Tacitus, they mention events and people that we find in the biblical narrative. This external corroboration lends further credibility to the Bible's historical claims. It's not just ancient historians either. We have archaeological findings like the Pilate stone, which confirms the existence of Pontius Pilate, or the Cyrus cylinder, which aligns with the biblical account of Cyrus allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem. These aren't proofs in the mathematical sense, but they're pieces of evidence that support the Bible's historical reliability. Now you might be thinking, well, that's all ancient history. What about modern scholarship? Well, I'm glad you asked, because modern scholarly research continues to support many aspects of the Bible's historical reliability. Advances in fields like archaeology, linguistics, and historical analysis have often served to confirm rather than refute biblical accounts. Now let's be clear. None of this means that every single word in the Bible can be historically or scientifically verified. There are still debates, still questions, still areas of uncertainty, but the weight of evidence, when examined objectively, strongly supports the overall historical reliability of the Bible. It's not about blind faith. It's about following the evidence where it leads. Look, the question of the Bible's reliability isn't just an academic exercise. It's about understanding the foundation of Western civilization, the basis for much of our moral and legal framework. If you want to dig deeper into this topic, I highly recommend The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. It's a journalistic investigation into the evidence for Christianity, and it's a great next step in this journey. Remember, it's not about accepting everything blindly. It's about honestly examining the evidence and being willing to follow it wherever it leads.